So I guess we're going to read a passage from Rick Rubin's book.
The Creative Act, A Way of Being.
And this book has been actually very inspiring to both of us. I'm just starting to read it, but I guess maybe let's not go too far into context. Let's just read.
All right. This is just one paragraph from one of the chapters. There are countless directions to explore, and we never know which will guide us to a dead end and which will lead us to new realms until we test it. In the case of a song, a vocalist might respond very quickly to a musical track, and the melody will immediately reveal itself. Other times, although the singer finds the musical track compelling, they will listen to it 1,000 times and nothing will come from it. All right. That was all I had.
Okay. So I guess we'll start our meditation.
Yeah, 3-minute meditation. We'll press the start button, then we'll stop when the bell rings. Flow right into it.
Perfect. Okay, and welcome to the Thought Mining Podcast, Episode 2. I'm Derek Olson, your co-host, along with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Nathan Anderson, and we're here to explore the inner depths and mine for the gold in the mountain of our thoughts, the ceaseless mountain of thoughts cascading into infinity and beyond. I don't know what I'm saying. Welcome, Nathan.
Welcome, Derek. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just to catch people up, you and I just did a 3-minute meditation in order to kind of prepare ourselves for this podcast. What went through your mind while you were doing that?
Well, we preceded the meditation with that reading from Rick Rubin, and for some reason, some of those takeaways from that passage were flowing through my mind. He talked about how a musician might sing a verse and then all of a sudden the full melody will take shape, but other times that verse will go through their mind and they'll repeat it over and over and over hundreds of times and nothing will come out of it. And I started to think about how that relates to the thought mining concept that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So sometimes a thought will pop up in your mind and you'll really start to resonate with it. You'll repeat it over and over and over again. And sometimes you draw some very meaningful takeaways from that, but other times it just keeps going on autoplay in your mind and nothing ends up coming out of it.
Yep. That reminds me of this really interesting saying that I heard the other day. And it said, writing, it was about writing in general. And I'm going to butcher the saying and I don't even know where it came from, but it's not something I just thought of. So I'm not going to try to take credit for it or anything. But essentially the gist of the saying was, sometimes I open up my laptop and stare at my computer for 8 hours and don't write anything. And that is writing. And I believe in that because that is writing, because we can't just call our artistic efforts either not an effort just because it didn't quote unquote succeed, because that 8 hours of block that person forced themselves to sit through might just be the impetus behind the new change in direction that changes their art forever in a positive way. So whether or not you actually have the output or the success, it doesn't mean that you're not doing the action. And I think that even if you haven't put a word down, and I do suggest that if you're writing, you please write some words down, just let it flow and then edit it later. I mean, this isn't writing advice by any means, but just the fact that you put the intention and effort into the moment and spent the time, you've already done the act to an extent. I mean, obviously, just because it didn't succeed doesn't mean it didn't exist. And sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to really just fail for a bit, and then some clarity will come. And so it's about patience.
Yeah, I love it. I've never really interpreted it through that type of lens before, that 8 hours of sitting and creating no output actually is a key point along the path to whatever it is that you're creating.
Yep, and I think it's important also so that we don't tear ourselves down. You'd be like, sit there and punch yourself in the face. I haven't created anything in 8 hours. It was a big waste of time and blah, blah. It wasn't a waste of time because you needed to go through that 8 hours to get to where your destination is. And I try to like remind myself that of any time I feel like I've quote unquote wasted my time. Like, let's say you're trying to fix your car and you go up the wrong avenue and you go and replace a part and the car still got problems. Did you waste your time? I mean, to some extent, maybe. Like, if you really started to calculate in a cold way of output versus time, maybe, you quote unquote failed. But what you did is you learned what not to do. You learned what doesn't work. And that's learning too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I can relate to that in so many ways. I know just, looking back at school when I was younger and working on assignments and just feeling like my mind is blank and there's nothing that I can produce. But sitting there and sort of letting those thoughts permeate, even if they don't result in any sort of output, eventually lead to something that matters.
Right. And also, I think convincing yourself that you are being effective and this wasn't a waste of time helps you with your confidence and stuff, because nobody wants to feel like, oh, I literally wasted my time or I failed in my effort, because that can just be a morale killer to an extent. And we need to be always, I think, patting ourselves on the back and sort of pushing ourselves and being our own sort of like, I don't know, what would you say? Like our own constructive parent to ourselves sometimes. So, right. Hey, buck up, big guy. You'll get it next time. But you did a lot. You learned a lot in that 8 hours sitting there. And now you have discovered what directions not to go down and what directions might not be best for you. Even though maybe you haven't found your direction yet, but you haven't wasted your time.
Right. I'm starting to think about how that relates to even the topic or the title of this podcast of thought mining. Mm-hmm. During those 8 hours, if you happen to find yourself in a situation like that, you could try to start practicing these thought mining strategies where you can allow yourself to sort of enter into this conscious state of being and become an observer of the thoughts that are going through your mind, and then start to really resonate with those that are jumping out at you, and then maybe use those as sort of the seeds of inspiration to start writing.
Right. And I think to an extent, I did a version of that in our meditation session, because at first, all I could think about was, oh, is the recorder going? I thought, oh man, maybe I should have Nathan check my focus one more time. And I'm like, oh, are these batteries gonna die? Like every single technical worry went through my head. And then I caught it and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going to help me speak on this podcast. This is just the technical stuff. So at some point I have to let those worries just float away so that we can actually just concentrate on the thing we're doing. And, maybe I'll look at the camera and it'll be all out of focus afterwards. But at the same time, like, there's only so much you can control. So we just kind of have to push forward, even though I'm like, well, I hope all this stuff is proper. But so then when I was able to finally let those go and sort of get into sort of a mode where I was really just trying to block any thought as much as I was trying to come up with anything creative, And I don't know, it helped really settle me before we got started, I think.
Super cool. It reminds me of the empty shelf that you talked about last episode when you had, that has really resonated with me since you had brought that up as a visual and talking about carrying yourself with an empty shelf that allows room for new thoughts or new insights or new perspectives to add to it. And it seems to me like when you were starting the meditation before this episode, your shelves were full because you were thinking about all of the intricate details of things. Right. And you cleared the shelf and then created space for something new to surface.
Yep. And that's, I think, one of the great features of doing something like meditation or concentrating or thought mining or whatever, however we want to refer to it. It's just like, it's so easy to be, to not realize how many threads you have open or how many tabs you have open, like in your Google Chrome, you know what I mean? And sometimes you just got to shut those tabs and clear everything out so that you can focus on the one thing, because you can't physically focus on 12 things at once. You try, but it absolutely just, at some point, everything collapses on itself and you're just reactively bouncing from sort of urgency to urgency and always trying to solve everything. And I think that with that, also, you can kind of like put on a little bit of the horse blinders, and, it's good to be focused, but also you don't want to not see your peripherals, I guess.
Right. Focus when the time is right to focus, and when the time is right to allow something else to come in, allow yourself to be open. But yeah, I think there is really a time to be narrowly focused in on certain things, but also there are plenty of times when it's appropriate to be completely open to something new that could possibly arise within your awareness.
Right, and the two can complement each other. I think just as this did with this meditation session, there was a time, I had a wide focus, and then I was able to, by letting it all go, narrow it to, hey, what are we going to talk about today, and how are we going to, get through this podcast and make it entertaining the whole time, hopefully.
Yeah. I know last time we had talked about, I started out by reading part of one of the original reflections about thought mining, and we only got through a few sentences. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about continuing on with that a little bit? Partially because it leads into like a strategy for being able to practice individual thought mining, and that's sort of what I think it felt like where our conversation was somewhat going.
That sounds excellent. So yeah, if you want to catch up on episode 1, this is going to be, I guess, a natural continuation of our previous conversation.
Yeah. Okay. We will jump in on the next section of this reflection, which was written in the middle of the night, one night when I woke up and couldn't sleep. The first part of this reflection introduced the concept of thought mining, talked about individual thought mining, internal thought mining, external thought mining, and shared thought mining. And this next step talks about internal thought mining. So I'm just going to read this a little bit. Stop me if I'm going too far and you want to like pick some of this apart. But here it goes. You can practice internal thought mining by positioning yourself in a state of presence that allows you to maintain awareness of your thoughts. Simply observe your thoughts from a non-judgmental perspective as they pass through your mind. If you find yourself beginning to feel a stronger sense of resonance with a thought as it enters your stream of awareness, the deeper connection that you are feeling may be an indicator that the thought is worthwhile to ponder further. You may engage with the thought by allocating a greater degree of attention to the thought and allowing other related thoughts to surface and begin synthesizing with the thought. Considering how you might respond to predefined reflective prompts may also help foster your engagement with the thought in a way that helps cultivate meaningful insights. Methods of engaging with a resonating thought may include interpreting the thought through subsequent thinking, oral dictation to oneself, or writing. The concept of thought mining emerged through this process. Want me to get into that?
Well, let's, I guess there's a few things to talk about, and I have a little bit of a question about, and this isn't meant to in any way pick apart what you're saying, but instead to hopefully help someone who's trying to actually engage, but maybe has hit this roadblock. And it's just a potential roadblock that I thought of that maybe we could figure out a solution around before we get to the next step. And I think that some of us might struggle with triggering thoughts, in that all of our thoughts might not be positive, in that there might be a thought of like, ooh, I really messed that one up that time. You know what I mean? So then you're thinking, oh, okay, 3 years ago, I made a choice that was the wrong choice, and, well, the wrong, quote unquote, right? And I didn't get what I wanted from that, or I faced some sort of bash to my ego or whatever that then made me feel, turned me red in the face and I ran out the door, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And so those thoughts, I think, can accidentally, if we let them if we give them too much power in this type of situation, you might get stuck there. And so how do we get unstuck if we are thinking about something from our past or something that in our future as well? Like, oh, I've got this really stressful thing coming up and I don't know how I'm going to handle it. And you kind of can get into like unhealthy patterns where you might be envisioning the things that could go wrong or envisioning, how maybe you're not ready for it or whatever it is. And so then you can get into another, let's say mental trap. So I'm just trying to think about my experiences in the dead of the night, if I've ever been stuck in thought in ways that were like maybe, not good for me, or like, you'd be better off sleeping than thinking about this. So what do you think how could we strategize around getting out of that hole if you accidentally fall into it?
That's a great question. And I'd love to learn the strategies myself. And so I can speak from a little bit of experience, definitely not from any sort of professional position. But when this whole thought mining thing came up, I had never really thought about it in ways of like, how do you navigate destructive thoughts that are resonating,
mm-hmm.
which seems to be sort of what you're asking.
It's like the yin and yang of what we're talking about, I think, to an extent. There's the shadow and the one we're talking also about the one in the sun that stands out there in the daylight, but then, at some point night falls, right? Or whatever, you know what I mean? There's the two sides of the coin.
Yeah. I feel that. I mean, when you were talking and sort of explaining before you asked the question, it was really sticking out to me and resonating with me in terms of like, I've experienced that before many times. And, this is just sort of like a knee-jerk reaction to that maybe, is sort of how I could think about navigating that would maybe be to use that. If there's some sort of destructive thought that continues to surface in my mind about something that I'm dwelling on from the past or something that I'm destructively anticipating.
Well, first, how do we recognize that it's destructive? How do we first say, hey, wait, this isn't good? How do we even, because we might be a half hour into thinking about it before we realize, oh, this is like a negative thought pattern that's not doing me any good.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've probably become better at that over the years through practices of meditation and prayer and trying to center myself in the moment, like talking about the first part of the thought mining process as we just talked about a little bit earlier about being sort of in this conscious state of being or entering a state of presence. That becomes possible through practices like meditation or prayer, or yoga can sometimes do it, or engaging in certain activities. But I think if, to be able to recognize the whether something is destructive or constructive perceptively at the moment, I think it almost depends on you being in sort of a present state, which is something as it's been conveyed to me, or I've read and heard and even experienced on my own, is that you can enter a state like that almost on the spot. But knowing how to do that or knowing how to recognize it, you can sort of cultivate the ability to maybe be there more. So that's sort of a jumbled way of trying to respond to your question of like, how do you notice whether something's destructive? I think it requires you. I know that's sort of a bold word to say, but you almost need to be in a state of consciousness or presence. And
so maybe in that vein, you should be asking yourself often, whenever you're maybe thought mining, whether or not something's positive or negative. And just by asking yourself that question, it might give you the answer. So just having the wherewithal to check in maybe. Another thing I think about as a way to maybe recognize a negative thought pattern, it's like when a song gets stuck in your head. If you keep rethinking the same thought, no matter what it is, I think if it's looping in your mind a little bit, so like let's say you thought about something and then you're kind of going off on a little path thinking about something else, and all of a sudden the thing occurs to you again, then maybe check in with how it makes you feel emotionally. Like, is this a thought pattern that's like giving me joy right now? And if it's not giving you joy right now, and it might be like, let's say, giving you anxiety right now, Well, I think that you've recognized a negative thought pattern because it's looping and it's increasing your anxiety. So if you look for maybe like metrics like that or analysis like that, I mean, I know that it requires a certain detachment. But I think that's what we're going for though, right? So this is something that we need to exercise in order to be good at. So maybe if someone says, well, I can't detach myself like that. Well, that's why you're here. That's why we're here, right? We're attempting to flex that muscle of detachment to an extent and be able to watch the stream. I think we use that image as well. Just watch the stream of thoughts, without necessarily an investment, positive or negative. Just instead of looking for an investment in how is this going to serve me or function for me, we need to find a different way of measuring what's valuable. And what would you say would be a good way of measuring a thought for value as it passes by your...
Yeah, I mean, it's such a subjective experience for me, thinking that the term resonance tends to jump out at me oftentimes when I think about that. And it's those thoughts that connect with me in a way that seems a little bit different or more profound than other thoughts. And those are the types that I tend to gravitate toward, and not even really knowing if they're going to turn into anything, but I find myself jotting notes down, writing them down. But it's hard to come up with some sort of a formal, tangible measure for that.
And so maybe something will speak to you and you won't be able to necessarily analyze what it is about the thing that's speaking to you, maybe until after.
Right.
So you'll say, this is just speaking to me, but then if you really sit down and analyze it, maybe the next morning, you'd be like, you know what, this probably appeals to my, love of nature, or, whatever it is. Or, maybe there's some characteristic that I carry that this is obviously really connecting with right now.
Yeah. I mean, I had an experience like that last week after our episode when I was walking back to my office, which I want to put on hold for a second because I feel like I want to wrestle with the negative, destructive thought patterns a little bit more. But, thinking that sometimes those negative, looping, destructively perceptive thought patterns seem like it might be appropriate to observe and let them go. But other times it might be a sign of sorts that you need to address this.
Yeah.
This is something that really matters to your life. You've sort of suppressed this and it's coming to the surface.
Or figure out why it's important to you, and maybe you can learn something about that, So let's just say, I'll use a fake example for me, and maybe we can just thought mine our way to why it's important. Now, I don't think this is an example from today, but let's just say that as a younger person, I was playing on a sports team, basketball or whatever, and I missed the winning shot, right? So the whole game came down to that shot. I whiffed it. Bang, right off the end, right? This didn't really happen because I wasn't really able to make the basketball team. I wasn't that good in high school, but if I were, and I missed the winning shot at the championship game, and it's haunting me 22 years later or whatever, in this fictional scenario, is there something I need to learn about myself when I say, hey, why am I revisiting this thought? Why haven't I let this go this many years later? What is it about this thought? Maybe there's a lesson there for me. It's probably just let it go, but
yeah,
maybe there's another lesson there,
Yeah, there sure could be. And it might be something that you would find out if you started writing about it or talking about it or thinking about it further, trying to do something like that through more of a constructive approach than I'm so terrible or I'm so bad. How could I have let my team down?
Yep.
I'm awful.
If only I had divested myself from worrying about the outcome of the shot and just lived in the present moment, I would have made that shot.
Yeah, right.
So I need to just be in the present moment more and stop thinking about the outcome, because to be honest with you, if anybody who's ever missed a catch in baseball or missed a 3-pointer or whatever at the buzzer, every single time, if you really go back and interpret it, or, look at it, you always were overthinking it, right? You always said to yourself, I hope I don't miss this, like as the ball. And I actually had this conversation with my son. It's like the only way to miss a catch is to think, I hope I don't miss this catch, because the minute you think that, it's over. You've already missed the catch.
Yeah.
You just can't even have a thought. You just have to kind of like disconnect from your sort of critical thinking in order to catch or hit the three or whatever it is. So, but then even though we know this intrinsically, I know that in order to make the three, I have to be the ball, right? I have to be one with the universe and just, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, like disconnect and just kind of like be able to like see through, right? And if you ever, whenever you make one, you're always like, oh yeah, I was like in that zone for just that split second and I felt it,
Right.
And so I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm losing my train of thought here, but a little bit about, like, I guess how overthinking can, it's hard to say because it's not just overthinking, it's also being connected to the results, right? So feeling like I'm good or bad if I make or miss, right? So if I miss, I'm bad, and if I make, I'm good. And that investment is what's going to make you miss the shot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to ponder there. I've certainly experienced that. I know, I see it when I play pickleball right now.
Right.
Like, I can feel like a sequence of points going very well and everything's going exactly where I want it to go, and I'm not thinking about it. But then as soon as I start to think about it,
right,
I'm like, oh, this is going so well. What am I doing right? Then
yeah.
I'm like, how can I keep this going? As soon as I start to ask myself those questions, then all of a sudden my mind interferes and becomes sort of a barrier to my optimal productivity.
I think that's almost kind of analogous in a way to thought mining and getting caught in a negative thought loop or something. It's maybe the same sort of mental discipline to break, so if you see yourself like overthinking in basketball or pickleball, can you catch that and say, I'm overthinking right now and I need to be able to disconnect from, my investment in the outcome. Who cares? I win, I lose. It's how you play the game.
Right. I mean, the mind is so powerful, but it can become such a barrier to production of whatever it is that you're doing, or even just like quality of life or experience that you're having.
Right.
So knowing, practicing thought mining can maybe help, as you said, sort of strengthen that ability to point out or resonate with the thoughts that are really important and know when the time is right to contemplate them further and draw meaning out of them. But all of the others, just let them go. Like I saw some quote the other day. It had to do with something like, the average person thinks 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day or something.
Oh my goodness.
Something crazy like that. And so I don't know if that's,
And all of them are like, did I leave the gas on at home? Or
Yeah. But some of those matter. Others, many of them are just, existing because your mind is a thought machine of sorts.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I would say that if we're having 60 or 70,000 thoughts a day, that we're not even probably physically capable of cataloging them. So, I mean, let's just say you had a super fast hand that could write down every thought as it occurred, right? You would have, sorry, I don't know what happened to my voice just now, but you would have pages and pages of thoughts that have gone through your head. And if you went back and read it, maybe you would recognize those thoughts. Gosh, my voice, what's going on?
That's all right. Cough it out. You got it.
You'd be like, oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, it's just a little frog there. Maybe you would recognize those thoughts in terms of like, oh yeah, I remember I thought that, but if you hadn't written them down, you'd probably never really, let's say, re-reference most of those 70,000 thoughts. But it's curious. I mean, it makes me curious to think about like what kind of thoughts those could be for the most part, because I would say that if you said, Derek, how many thoughts do you have during a day? I would estimate roughly like 1,000 maybe.
Yeah.
Not 70,000.
I have no idea.
70,000, 1,000 seems like a lot.
I might be wrong on that too. I mean, definitely don't quote us on that. That is, it's a lot, there's a lot. a lot.
But if you think about like what is a thought, like, you know, like let's just say I glance over and I see a microphone over there or whatever, and I thought, oh, microphone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Is it
those
a
are
word
bing, 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 bing happening all the time. So
Yeah, right. Is it a word? Is it a phrase? Is it a sequence of sentences?
yeah, what qualifies?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even like if you, like, let's say you look at something, like I'm looking at the speaker, right? Can I visually look at that and not have a thought? Or have I already had a thought because I looked at it? Because my brain and eyes are connected, you know what I mean? So
right.
If I just see 70,000 objects, did I have 70,000 thoughts, you know, to some extent? Just recognizing the object or not recognizing, like speaker, camera, light, microphone, you know, each one a thought.
Yeah. And we can think of other stuff in the meantime as well.
Yeah. So what were you thinking on the way back from the podcast the other day?
Oh, yeah.
Or unless I'm changing the subject.
No, it's all good. I mean, I think that's something that I think is worthwhile to discuss. I actually wrote it down when I got back to the office.
Do you want to read it now?
Yeah. I'm scrolling for it here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard.
No, it's all good. It's a good opportunity to just sort of, you know, contemplate something.
That's what we're here to do. Lots and lots of thoughts and contemplations.
Yeah. I'm going to bring us back to it when I find it.
Okay.
But, yeah, let's go on some stuff here. Some other stuff. Let's let that one kind of drift by for the moment.
Okay.
That's one that kind of brings me back to the passage that we were reading earlier about how sometimes something will kind of repeat in your mind over and over, and then it's not going to take you anywhere. This feels like kind of an example of that. Like I was thinking about it, you were thinking about it. Like, what did you say on the way back to work? And then we bring it up again, and we're ready to discuss it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we can't discuss it because I don't have it in front of me. So
that happens.
So I'll scroll through and I'll find it, so I'm prepared for that. But yeah, like in the meantime, Well, one thing I want to recommend, so you and I both have recently kind of discovered Rick Rubin and his philosophy on creativity, which I think is really, really interesting and provocative. But both of us recently also watched the television show Dave, and particularly, well, we didn't watch the whole show, but I suggested season 2, episode 9, which has Rick Rubin in it, and it's about the main character going through his own sort of creative journey and finding his own voice through that process with the help of Rick Rubin. And you know, there was an isolation tank and maybe some drugs, and you know, a lot of things went into that. What did you think about that episode? I thought it was awesome. Like by the end of it, when he sort of just like, he gets there. I guess first he gets there and he's just kind of like, you know, all excited and, you know, about ready to create something. And then the process of creating is not quite what he was expecting, I think. Like he was sort of just put into this space where he was supposed to not really create using the instruments and tools that he thought he was going to use to create, but just to sort of allow all of his attachments to dissipate and fade away, and then so he could create that space.
And also, I think, so I'll just describe a little bit about the setup of the episode. So Dave is going to this guru, Rick Rubin's house, in order to find his creativity, because he just hasn't been able to come up with any good stuff in recent times. And he just thinks, oh, I'm going to go see Rick Rubin, he'll fix me. And that's what I thought was interesting about it too, because he showed up with the expectation that this expert is going to fix him or show him or teach him or, you know, figure it out for him. But what he found was that only he could do that for himself. And Rick Rubin helped through the process, helped him find himself so that he could be the author of his own thing. He didn't need someone to fix him. He just needed to, you know, see straight, I guess. And my favorite part was when I think it's supposed to be his ego, and it's himself with, like, he's got a shaved head and shaved eyebrows, and he's like, I think I'm supposed to kill you. And he's like, What do you mean kill me? What are you talking about? So Yeah, so I just thought that part was really funny because it's like ego death or whatever. It's like, am I supposed to kill you? But yeah, anyways, I think that it was really one of the funniest episodes. I always think of that episode. I kind of like the show Dave, but I really like that episode in particular. And then also, at first he sees this guy sitting out there and he thinks it's Rick Rubin, and it's like this old guy with long hair, and he walks up and the guy's like, I'm Biff Whiff. And he's like, Biff Whiff? And he's like, I'm a real guy. Seriously, look me up on IMDb. So I looked him up on IMDb, and Biff Whiff is an actor. And then a week later, I'm watching the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And guess who's in the movie?
Biff Whiff?
Biff Whiff. Yeah, and I swear I've seen him. I saw him in a trailer of something recently. I feel like his career is like blowing up now.
Wow, that's so cool.
But it's got to be because of that part. I don't know.
Yeah, that was so good. Yeah, I think he was going there with these expectations, but then what Rick has allowed or fostered is just sort of like this set of conditions that allow the person who is there to create, or to allow their creativity to naturally emerge.
Yep, and I think a lot of the process that he went through reminds me of what we did when I was having the monkey brain. Is this working? Is that working? Thinking about all the technicals of this podcast, and then through meditation was able to finally be like, okay, if it's going, it's going. If it's not, it's not. You know, I mean, maybe I didn't hit record on all these and we're just talking to ourselves, you know, but at the end of the day, I can't think about that if I want to have an effective conversation with you. So I have to let go of that. And I think Dave showed up in that space as I showed up in this space, you know, thinking about this and the technicals and that and the other thing, you know, and what Rick was trying to get him to do was to let all of that go and really get to the source, you know, of what's creativity. And sometimes, you know, we don't know where the source is in all of the complexities and all of the things that we're, you know, considering at the moment and measuring in our heads.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm so drawn to that process, and I feel like in a way we're trying to practice that, as you mentioned, with the meditation at the beginning, but just this whole project in general is we're seeming to sort of just allow it to take shape as it goes. And it's so unlike what I'm used to doing in a formal sense. And so I'm really having a blast with it and finding a lot of value. You know, something just like speaks to you, and you can tell that you're headed in the right direction, although you don't quite know where you're headed. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Like, how long has this been going? This specific conversation?
Just now?
Yeah, where are we at?
I have no clue. How long have we been talking?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm 20 minutes maybe? I don't know. When did we start?
I don't know. The counter there says 43 minutes.
Okay, so we're probably around the 30-minute mark because of. So let's. I think we're getting close to the end of the episode, and we'll need to button it up. We'll need to tie a bow around this episode a little bit and kind of like conclude and also summarize.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Let's do it. I feel like it's a good time to do that.
Right.
Because I mean, 30 minutes is I don't know. For me, I'm just kind of seeing this through my own lens. It's like 30-ish minutes is a good amount of time for me to listen to an episode and then pick up on the next one.
Well, one of my favorite podcasts is called Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. I don't know if you've ever indulged in it, but the thing about one of his episodes is they're 6 hours long, and he works on them for like 4 or 5 months at a time.
Yeah.
So when it finally comes out, it's like essentially a book, you know, audio book, and I honestly fall asleep after 5 to 10 minutes. I can't. So it'll take me I'll be listening to the same episode for months.
Yeah.
But you know, I use podcasts to go to sleep a lot because it shuts the chatter up. But and also I find historical stories kind of interesting because then I can sort of like get into the movie of it, and then I fall asleep a little bit. But yeah, so I mean, I think 30 minutes for us is pretty good because I think it's there's a little bit of a mental challenge to the audience a little bit that we're presenting if they really want to grapple with these things. And I think for me, with learning in general, there's only so much you can learn before you're kind of like your cup's full and then everything's just spilling over the cup. And so I always try to figure out where that point is for me and where I need to like take a break and then come back with a little more space, or a little more space on the shelf as it were.
Yeah, same here. So I mean, thinking about how this episode went, we started out with this little meditation. I don't know if that's going to show up on this or like even
I might speed through it
or so.
Yeah, I'll do fast motion. So otherwise we'll lose everybody because it's like 3 minutes of
silence. That sort of led into a conversation that took us to talking about how we can thought mine ourselves and sort of what are some of the characteristics of thought mining, which then led into I read that part of the reflection that talked about strategies for doing an internal thought mining practice, which seemed to lead us into other conversations about how maybe we do that a little bit. Talked about some destructive thoughts and how you wrestle with those. I know we still probably have a lot to pick apart with that at some point in time, but it really gives some good seed, some good seed for contemplation after the show. You know, I was going to read a little reflection from last time on my way back to my office. Don't have time to really do that right now, but I'll do that next episode.
Yeah, I think that I'm really looking forward to hearing that in the next episode. So if you want to hear that on the next episode, please tune in, smash that like button, and hit the subscribe button. I don't know what you're on. Maybe you're on YouTube or something or TikTok, but just smash and subscribe. Because that, I think, applies to everything, right? Just smash and subscribe.
Right. If you dig it.
Yeah, if you dig it. If this is your jam. All right, well, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for joining us for episode 2. We'll be back soon with episode 3, and stay with us and join our cult. Join our thought mining cult.
Welcome.
And we're all going to wear robes at the end. Yeah, this is really just like, we're just leading you in, and we got so much planned for you. A lot of it involves, tattoos, rituals, things like that, but maybe some animal sacrifices later. But all right, thanks a lot, and bye.